Sophia, the intelligence behind pattern and timing, sent you a signal, not yesterday, not tomorrow, right now. And here's what most people don't understand. This specific frequency activates once per timeline. If you leave now, it doesn't repeat. Not because I'm threatening you, because that's how recognition works. The moment passes, or it crystallizes. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to show you cannot be unseen. And you'll finally understand why you felt different your entire life. Something profound is unfolding in your awareness right now, and you can already sense it. Not because I'm telling you, but because you arrived here through a series of choices that weren't entirely conscious. The algorithm didn't randomly select this video for you. Your recent searches, your lingering questions, your midnight contemplations, they created a signal, and that signal led you here. This isn't about destiny or divine intervention. This is about resonance. Your inner frequency has been shifting, and you've been looking for confirmation that what you're experiencing is real. I'm here to tell you it is, but more importantly, I'm here to help you understand what comes next, because recognition without direction leads to confusion, and confusion leads to abandonment of the very gifts you're beginning to discover. My name isn't what matters here. What matters is that I've walked this path myself, stumbled through the same confusing phases you're likely experiencing now, and eventually found clarity through a framework that actually works. Not a framework that promises instant enlightenment or magical thinking, but one that honors the genuine spiritual experiences you're having while giving you practical steps to integrate them into your everyday life. Over the next hour, we're going to explore something I call the frequency alignment process, a structured approach to working with the heightened sensitivity you've been experiencing. No false urgency, no manipulation, no claims that this is your one chance. Just honest exploration of what's happening to you and how to work with it constructively. Let's start with what you've probably been experiencing. For the past several months, maybe longer, you've noticed patterns that others seem to miss entirely. You see repeating numbers, not occasionally, but with a frequency that feels statistically impossible. 11:11 on the clock when you randomly check. 444 on a license plate just as you're thinking about a major decision. 777 on a receipt when you're questioning whether you're on the right path. Your rational mind tries to dismiss this as confirmation bias, as your brain's simply noticing patterns it's primed to see. And while that's partially true, it doesn't explain the emotional response you have when these patterns appear. There's a recognition that happens, a feeling of alignment, of being momentarily connected to something larger than yourself. This isn't delusion. This is your awareness expanding beyond the purely material interpretation of reality. You've also probably experienced shifts in your sleep patterns that don't match any medical explanation. Some nights you sleep 3 or 4 hours and wake completely energized, as though you've somehow recharged more efficiently than normal. Other nights you sleep 9 or 10 hours and wake exhausted, feeling like you've been working all night even though you can't remember your dreams. Your doctor finds nothing wrong. Blood tests come back normal, but the experience is undeniably real. What's happening is that your consciousness is processing information on multiple levels simultaneously. During these deep sleep phases, your mind is reorganizing itself, integrating new ways of perceiving reality that don't fit into your previous frameworks. This is exhausting work, even though it happens unconsciously. And on nights when you sleep less but wake refreshed, you're accessing states of consciousness that are genuinely restorative in ways that normal sleep isn't. States that mystics and meditators spend years trying to reach deliberately. You're reaching them spontaneously because something in you is ready. There's also the knowing, that strange, unexplainable certainty about things you have no logical reason to be certain about. You know a phone call is coming seconds before it rings. You know what someone is about to say before they say it. You know you shouldn't take a particular route home, and later discover there was an accident on that road. This isn't psychic ability in the supernatural sense. This is expanded perception. Your brain is processing far more information than your conscious mind can track. Subtle cues in body language, micro-patterns in behavior, environmental signals that your conscious awareness filters out as irrelevant. But now, for reasons we'll explore, those filters are loosening. You're perceiving more of the data that's always been there, and your intuition is becoming significantly more accurate as a result. The challenge is learning to trust it without becoming paranoid or detached from rational thinking. And then there's the isolation. Not necessarily physical isolation, but a growing sense that you're experiencing reality differently than the people around you. You try to share these experiences with friends or family, and their responses range from polite dismissal to genuine concern about your mental health. They don't see the patterns you see. They don't feel the energies you feel. They don't experience the synchronicities that seem to guide your daily life. This creates a painful disconnect. You start to wonder if you're losing touch with reality, if you're creating elaborate narratives to make sense of random events, if you should just ignore these experiences and return to normal perception. But here's what I need you to understand. You're not going insane, and you're not alone. What you're experiencing is a documented phenomenon that occurs when consciousness begins operating at a higher baseline of awareness. It's been described in every spiritual tradition throughout history, though the language and interpretation vary widely. In Buddhist tradition, it's part of the path toward enlightenment. In Christian mysticism, it's the beginning of contemplative awakening. In modern psychology, it's sometimes called ego transcendence or self-actualization. The experience is universal. The challenge is navigating it in a culture that doesn't provide frameworks for understanding it. So let's talk about what's actually happening from a neurological and psychological perspective, because understanding the mechanism reduces fear and increases your ability to work with the process constructively. Your brain operates primarily through pattern recognition. It takes incoming sensory data, compares it to stored patterns from past experience, and generates predictions about what's likely to happen next. This is how you navigate the world efficiently, by not having to consciously analyze every single piece of information you encounter. But this efficiency comes with limitations. Your brain filters out enormous amounts of data as irrelevant based on what it's learned to prioritize. What's happening to you now is a loosening of those filters. This can occur for several reasons. Sometimes it's triggered by trauma or crisis that disrupts normal psychological patterns. Sometimes it's the result of sustained contemplative practice like meditation. Sometimes it emerges spontaneously during periods of major life transition. Regardless of the trigger, the effect is the same. You begin perceiving layers of reality that were previously filtered out. This includes subtle emotional cues in others, systemic patterns in events that seem unrelated, and your own unconscious processing that normally doesn't reach conscious awareness. From a subjective standpoint, this feels like awakening to a deeper reality. And in a meaningful sense, you're accessing more of what's actually present in your experience, rather than operating through habitual, limited perception. Now here's where most people make a critical mistake. They interpret this expanded awareness as a spiritual gift that sets them apart, makes them special, or indicates they've been chosen for some higher purpose. This interpretation creates several problems. First, it inflates the ego precisely when the goal should be transcending ego identification. You become attached to your special status, which creates separation from others and feeds spiritual narcissism. Second, it makes you vulnerable to manipulation by teachers, systems, or communities that reinforce this narrative while extracting your money, time, or autonomy. Third, it creates expectation that can't be sustained. When your heightened perception inevitably fluctuates, because all states of consciousness fluctuate, you interpret it as spiritual failure, which generates anxiety and desperation to recapture the special state. So let me be absolutely clear. What you're experiencing doesn't make you special. It makes you aware. The capacity for expanded awareness exists in every human being. Some develop it, most don't. But potential isn't achievement, and awareness isn't enlightenment. What separates sustainable spiritual development from delusional spiritual ego is whether you use expanded awareness to serve your growth and the well-being of others, or whether you use it to construct elaborate narratives about your cosmic significance. This brings us to the frequency alignment process, a practical framework for working with heightened awareness without falling into the traps I just described. This isn't a mystical teaching. It's a structured approach based on principles from contemplative traditions, modern psychology, and my own direct experience navigating this territory. The framework has 4 phases, and I'm going to walk you through each one in detail so you have a clear map of what to expect and how to work with each stage constructively. Phase 1 is recognition and stabilization. This is where you are right now. You're experiencing phenomena that don't fit your previous understanding of how reality works, and you're trying to make sense of it. The work in this phase is twofold. First, you need to accurately identify what you're experiencing without either inflating it into something more than it is or dismissing it as meaningless. The repeating numbers are real. The heightened intuition is real. The sense of connection to something larger is real, but these experiences don't require supernatural explanations. They're natural phenomena that emerge when awareness expands beyond habitual limitations. Recognizing them as real but natural allows you to work with them practically rather than getting lost in mystical interpretation. Second, you need to stabilize your nervous system, which is likely overwhelmed by processing significantly more information than it's accustomed to handling. This requires basic practices, consistent sleep schedule as much as possible, regular physical movement, reduced stimulant intake, time in nature, and deliberate periods of silence away from screens and social interaction. These aren't optional extras. Your nervous system is recalibrating, and it needs support to do so without burning out. Many people experience what's called a spiritual emergency during expanded awareness, a crisis point where the intensity of perception becomes destabilizing rather than illuminating. Proper self-care during Phase 1 prevents this crisis from occurring. Phase 2 is integration and discernment. Once you've stabilized and accurately recognized what you're experiencing, the next challenge is integrating expanded awareness into your daily life without it becoming a source of confusion or dysfunction. This means developing discernment, the ability to distinguish between genuine intuition and anxiety, between meaningful synchronicity and random coincidence, between expanded perception and delusional thinking. Discernment develops through practice and honest self-reflection. When you have a strong intuitive hit about something, test it. Not in high-stakes situations where you could harm yourself or others if you're wrong, but in low-stakes context where you can gather data about your accuracy. You sense you shouldn't go to a particular coffee shop today. Go anyway and see what happens. Maybe nothing notable occurs, which suggests your intuition was just anxiety. Or maybe something genuinely challenging happens that you avoided in an alternate timeline, though you'll never know for certain. The point isn't to achieve perfect accuracy. The point is to develop calibration, understanding when your intuition tends to be reliable versus when your mind is generating false signals based on fear or wishful thinking. Over time, you'll notice patterns. Certain types of intuitive hits are almost always accurate, others are consistently wrong. This self-knowledge is invaluable. Integration also means maintaining your responsibilities and relationships while your awareness is expanding. It's tempting to withdraw from normal life, to quit your job, end your relationships, and pursue spiritual development full-time. Some people are genuinely called to make radical life changes, but most people who do this prematurely end up creating unnecessary suffering for themselves and others. Instead, bring your expanded awareness into your existing life. Notice how your relationships shift when you're more present. Notice how your work changes when you're operating from intuition as well as analysis. Notice how daily activities become richer when you're perceiving more dimensions of experience. This is integration, allowing spiritual development to enhance your life rather than require you to abandon it. Phase 3 is transmission and service. Once you've stabilized and integrated expanded awareness, you naturally begin to transmit it to others. This doesn't necessarily mean becoming a teacher or content creator, though some are called to that path. Transmission happens through presence. When you're operating from expanded awareness, people feel it. Your calm affects their nervous systems. Your clarity helps them access their own inner knowing. Your authenticity gives them permission to be authentic. You don't have to say anything profound. Your state of being does the work. This is where spiritual development stops being about you and starts being about service. Not service in the martyrdom sense of sacrificing yourself for others, but service in the natural sense of your growth, contributing to the growth of everyone you encounter. Some people formalize this through teaching, healing work, creative expression, or community leadership. Others simply live with such integrity and presence that they elevate every interaction they're part of. Both paths are valuable, neither is superior. The key is recognizing that expanded awareness comes with responsibility, not obligation imposed from outside, but natural responsibility that emerges from understanding how deeply interconnected we all are. When you harm another, you harm yourself. When you serve another's genuine growth, you serve your own. This isn't mystical philosophy. It's recognition of how consciousness actually works once you're perceiving beyond individual ego boundaries. Phase 4 is embodiment and ordinariness. This is the most misunderstood phase of spiritual development, and it's where many seekers get stuck because it doesn't match their expectations. After years of heightened experiences, profound realizations, and periods of blissful connection to something greater, the intensity gradually settles into something much quieter. You still have access to expanded awareness, but it no longer feels extraordinary. It's simply how you experience reality now. The repeating numbers still appear, but they don't trigger the same excitement. The intuitive knowing is still present, but it's integrated so fully that you don't consciously register it as intuition anymore. It's just how you navigate life. This ordinariness is actually the goal, though it doesn't feel like achievement. You're no longer seeking peak experiences or trying to maintain heightened states. You're simply living with greater presence, clarity, and compassion than you had before the process began. From the outside, you might not appear particularly special. You're not radiating visible light or performing miracles. You're just remarkably grounded, unusually kind, and strangely untroubled by things that disturb most people. This is embodiment. Spiritual realization lived so fully that it becomes your ordinary way of being. Many people resist this phase because it feels like loss. Where's the magic? Where's the cosmic significance? Where's the proof that all this work meant something? But ordinariness is the proof. You no longer need extraordinary experiences to validate your worth or confirm your connection to something greater. You've relaxed into simply being, and that's the deepest spiritual achievement possible. Now let's talk about what actually supports progression through these phases. Because good intentions aren't enough. You need practices, not complicated rituals or esoteric techniques, but simple, sustainable practices that support nervous system regulation, clear perception, and embodied presence. I'm going to share 5 core practices that have proven effective across contemplative traditions and modern neuroscience research. These aren't the only practices that work, but they're foundational. Master these, and you'll have a solid base for whatever additional practices resonate with you later. Practice 1. Conscious breathing. 3 times per day, morning, midday, and evening. Spend 5 minutes breathing consciously. Not special breathing patterns, not forced deep breaths, just natural breathing that you're paying attention to. Inhale, notice the sensation. Exhale, notice the sensation. When your mind wanders, gently return attention to the breath. This practice does several things simultaneously. It trains your attention, which is the foundation of all advanced spiritual practice. It regulates your nervous system, shifting you out of fight or flight reactivity. It creates space between stimulus and response, giving you choice in how you engage with experience. 5 minutes, 3 times daily. Non-negotiable if you want sustainable progress. Practice 2. Embodied awareness. Once daily, spend 10 minutes checking in with physical sensation throughout your body. Start at the top of your head and slowly move attention downward. Notice any tension, warmth, coolness, tingling, numbness, or other sensation. Don't try to change anything, just notice. This practice grounds expanded awareness in your physical body, preventing the dissociation that many spiritual seekers experience. It also develops interoception, your ability to sense internal states, which is directly linked to emotional intelligence and intuitive accuracy. Your body holds enormous wisdom that your thinking mind often ignores. This practice creates dialogue between body and mind. Practice 3. Authentic reflection. At the end of each day, spend 10 minutes journaling about 3 questions. Where did I act with integrity today? Where did I compromise my values or truth? What's trying to emerge in my awareness? Be ruthlessly honest. This isn't about self-judgment or self-congratulation. It's about seeing yourself clearly. Over time, patterns become visible. You notice the recurring situations where you betray yourself. You see the emerging themes that point toward your next growth edge. Self-deception is the greatest obstacle to spiritual development. This practice dismantles it gradually. Practice 4. Relational presence. Choose 1 interaction per day to be fully present for. Not scrolling on your phone, not planning what you'll say next, not multitasking. Just listening, just being with the other person. Notice your impulses to interrupt, to make the conversation about you, to offer advice they didn't ask for. Notice without acting on those impulses. True presence is rare and precious. When you offer it, people feel seen in a way they rarely experience. This practice trains you to bring expanded awareness into relationship, which is where spiritual development either becomes real or remains theoretical. Practice 5. Creative expression. Once weekly, spend at least 30 minutes creating something without concern for outcome or quality. Write, draw, dance, sing, build, cook, whatever allows you to express what's moving through you without self-censorship. Expanded awareness brings energy and insight that needs expression. If you don't create channels for that expression, it becomes trapped and eventually creates physical or emotional symptoms. Creative practice doesn't have to produce anything shareable. It's a release valve, a form of prayer, a conversation with the unconscious. These 5 practices, done consistently, create the foundation for navigating expanded awareness skillfully. Notice I didn't say they create enlightenment or guarantee particular outcomes. They create capacity to work with whatever emerges in your consciousness without being overwhelmed by it. That capacity is what allows sustainable spiritual development rather than temporary peak experiences followed by crashes. Now I want to address something important that often gets overlooked in spiritual content, the role of community. You cannot walk this path entirely alone. Not because you're insufficient or need someone to save you, but because human beings are social creatures whose consciousness develops in relationship. You need people who understand what you're experiencing, not to validate every interpretation you have, but to mirror your process, challenge your blind spots, and remind you of your humanity when you get lost in spiritual concepts. This doesn't necessarily mean joining an organization or finding a guru. It might mean connecting with 1 or 2 people who are on similar paths. It might mean participating in online communities where honest spiritual dialogue happens. The key is finding relationships based on mutual authenticity rather than hierarchy, on questions rather than certainties, on practice rather than theory. Avoid communities that claim to have all the answers. Avoid teachers who position themselves as enlightened masters. Avoid groups that require belief in specific metaphysical claims. Seek spaces where people are genuinely working on themselves, supporting each other's growth, and maintaining healthy skepticism about spiritual claims while remaining open to genuine mystery. I also want to address the practical question of how to maintain stability while going through these shifts, because expanded awareness often coincides with significant life changes. Your job might no longer fit. Your relationships might become strained. Your interests and values might shift dramatically. These changes are natural, but they need to be navigated carefully. Don't make major life decisions during periods of intense spiritual experience. Your perception is expanded, which is valuable, but it's also unstable. Wait until you've integrated the experience and return to baseline before deciding whether to quit your job, end your relationship, or make other irreversible choices. Many people make premature changes during spiritual opening and create unnecessary suffering as a result. Yes, some relationships and situations genuinely need to end, but rushing that process based on temporary expanded states often leads to regret. Give yourself time. Test your insights against reality. Seek counsel from people who know you well and have your genuine well-being at heart. Spiritual development should enhance your life, not require you to destroy it. Let me also be direct about something that's often avoided in spiritual content: mental health. Expanded awareness and mental illness can look similar from the outside, and sometimes they occur simultaneously. If you're experiencing symptoms that are significantly interfering with your ability to function, severe anxiety, depression, paranoia, hearing voices that give you harmful instructions, inability to distinguish internal experience from external reality, please seek professional mental health support. Spiritual practice is not a substitute for therapy or medication when those are genuinely needed. There's no shame in needing support. Many of the greatest contemplatives throughout history dealt with mental health challenges while also having profound spiritual experiences. These aren't mutually exclusive. You can work with expanded awareness while also treating depression. You can develop spiritual capacity while managing anxiety. Please don't let spiritual pride prevent you from getting help if you need it. Now, as we move toward conclusion, I want to offer you a framework for the next 90 days. Not because there's anything magical about 90 days, but because it's long enough to establish new patterns while being short enough to maintain focus. For the next 90 days, commit to the 5 core practices I outlined earlier. Every day, no exceptions. This isn't about perfection. If you miss a day, simply resume the next day without self-judgment, but genuinely commit. Put the practices in your calendar, set reminders, create accountability with someone who supports your development. During these 90 days, pay attention to what shifts. Not dramatic mystical experiences, though those might occur, but subtle changes in how you relate to yourself and others. Are you slightly more patient, slightly more honest, slightly more present? These small shifts compound. After 90 days, you'll have a noticeably different baseline of awareness than you do right now, and more importantly, you'll have proof through direct experience that consistent practice creates real change. That proof sustains motivation when initial enthusiasm fades. At the 90-day mark, reassess. Look back at where you started. Notice what's different. Then make new commitments for the next phase of development. Maybe you deepen existing practices. Maybe you add new ones. Maybe you begin sharing what you've learned with others. The path unfolds organically when you're doing the work. You don't need to plan 5 years ahead. You just need to take the next right step, then the next, then the next. Before we close, I want to address the question of whether this path is worth it. Expanded awareness brings gifts, but it also brings challenges. You see suffering you can't always alleviate. You feel others' pain more acutely. You become aware of systems and patterns that most people remain unconscious of, which can create a sense of alienation. Some days you'll wish you could return to simpler, more limited perception. But you can't. Once awareness expands, it doesn't fully contract back to previous limitations. So the question isn't whether to pursue this path, you're already on it. The question is whether you'll walk it skillfully or struggle against it. My invitation is to walk it skillfully, to use the tools and frameworks that support sustainable development, to find community, to maintain your humanity while your consciousness expands. This isn't about becoming superhuman or transcending the human condition. It's about becoming fully human, living with all your capacities activated, all your gifts accessible, all your compassion available. That's enough. That's more than enough. If this resonates with you, I invite you to take 3 immediate actions. First, subscribe to this channel. I create content specifically for people navigating expanded awareness, and having you as part of this community supports both your development and mine. Second, share this video with one person who you think might benefit from it, not to convince them of anything, but simply to offer a resource that might be helpful if they're ready for it. Third, leave a comment sharing where you are in this process, not to perform for others or prove anything, but simply to mark this moment. Writing it down makes it real. And finally, if you want to go deeper with structured support, I offer a membership program where we work with these principles in more detail. There are monthly practices, live sessions for questions and support, and a community of people on similar paths. It's not necessary. Everything you need to develop is available freely, but additional support can accelerate integration and prevent common pitfalls. You'll find the link in the description if that calls to you. Thank you for your attention, your openness, and your willingness to explore these territories with honesty and courage. The world needs people who are doing this work, not because you're special or chosen, but because consciousness evolving through you serves consciousness evolving through everyone. We're all connected in this process, all supporting each other's development whether we realize it or not. I'm honored to be part of your journey, even if only through this one video. May you walk this path with wisdom, courage, and compassion for yourself and all beings.